Hello everybody, welcome back to Strictly Story Mode Gaming, and once again we return to my one true gaming love. Behold this sumptuous reimagining of the Blue Palace in Solitude. Is it immersive or unimmersive, because this looks nothing like the rest of Skyrim. It is the Royal Palace after all, but not only is there nothing here of the Nord way, there are no distinctive signs of imperial influence. Are there even carpenters capable of such fine woodwork anywhere in Tamriel? Wallpaper is just not a thing in the Elder Scrolls interior design. Is this all an elaborate illusion cast by Sybil Stentor? Then why would she even bother in the kitchen and the servants' quarters? My answer? If you had to think too much about it, you have already lost immersion, my friend. Actually, for me personally, this mod is not immersive because I recognize these texture assets from another excellent mod, Clockwork by Anastar, that gives you a mansion more luxurious than the Blue Palace. In general, I try to preserve the lore friendliness of my builds, but excellent quality will always override my immersion instincts. And it happened again last month with this Triss Merigold custom voice follower mod by ZZJ. Even though I don't approve of Triss and her man-stealing ways, I'm gonna give her a pass for her exquisite high poly head, and I'll happily accept the compromise and immersion mixing of game lores. This mod is that good. The illusion was so complete in VR that I blurted out, "Triss, is that you?" when I first saw her at the Sleeping Giant. COVID times were such bumper years for Skyrim modding that I'm ashamed to admit having immersion dysfunction. After years of constantly blinging out my Skyrim for ultimate immersion, I've come to a sad conclusion. Before I lament on what's kicking my immersion in the nuts, I wanted to give you my 2 septums to clarify what immersion means to me, as this loaded word can mean vastly different things to different gamers. Skyrim immersion happens in moments when my mind completely forgets that I'm interacting through pixels on a screen in an elaborate simulation of medieval fantasy life. I get swept away to a make-believe world living an entirely different existence. Static mediums like books and film can also exert this type of illusion magic. Books, even with a limited use of just words, can fire up your imagination and even awaken your senses. But immersion in the best role-playing video games take on a unique dimension, not only due to the interactive engagement, but due to the fact that you are creating your own unique story. While VR might appear to have an advantage to induce spatial, sensory, kinesthetic immersion, it's actually much easier to break it given how close everything is to your eyes. Your brain can scan conflicting levels of detail in an instant. Now, vanilla Skyrim carries more immersion breakers than sweet rolls, but there is an army of modders to help you get over this hump. Immersiveness is not only highly individual, but it is also a very fiddly dynamic state based on your past experiences and inner state. One of the tricks of Skyrim modding is finding an optimum load order that will give you the most immersive pleasure at the time of play, given the limitations of the creation engine and your hardware. If I'm being honest, I have to admit my Skyrim immersion was at the highest in my first 10 hours of mostly vanilla Skyrim VR, when everything was brand spanking new and my senses were utterly overwhelmed by this VR world. After hundreds of immersion mods and 50 gigs worth of 4K 8K textures, Skyrim is paradoxically getting progressively less and less immersive for me because overmodding is my biggest immersion killer. Besides the obvious immersion-breaking bugs, crashes, and performance problems introduced by slapping on one too many mods, there is a much more insidious root cause. When you reverse breach the 4th wall by modding too actively, the Skyrim gods will punish you by implanting a modding virus directly into your brain. The infected neurons will constantly assess the metastate of the game, preventing nirvana of true immersion. When you constantly mod your game to increase your immersion, your mind is also constantly attuned and looking out for things that are not immersive and should be fixed. For example, when I finally made it up to High Hrothgar, I was too distracted by the Greybeards having low poly beards. I actually ripped off my VR headset to find a proper beard mod. And every time I see another knotted beard, I automatically think to myself, yeah, that beard mod totally deserves a permanent place of honor in my load order. I can't easily turn off that part of my brain because there's a very practical reason not to. If you have heavily modded your Skyrim, that means you have the sole responsibility for the stability and performance of your game. Each session doubles also as a quality assurance test, especially if you lack discipline like me and slap on new mods every session. Even though I've hidden the HUD, all quest markers, and enemy health bars, the first thing I do when I go to any city is to assess the frame rate. If it's bad enough, I have to take my headset off and start debugging because low frame rates in VR is not only an immersion killer, but motion sickness will kick you out of play. If you continuously pile on one glorious mod after another, you will suffer the excruciating curse of performance degradation. It doesn't matter how powerful your CPU GPU is, Bethesda's creaking creation engine does not use modern CPU cores efficiently, and can handle only so much load before it keels over. There's a reason that you could fit all the Stormcloaks from the Battle of Whiterun into one horse cart. Recently, I've been forced to abandon my old build due to such performance rot, and have started all over with a new load order. But none of this is going to stop me from my delicious modding addiction. In the same way that people constantly redecorate their homes, there is a true joy reshaping Skyrim into your very specific tastes, given the sheer creativity and productivity of the modders. However, that which brings many other gamers immersive joy might not turn you on, and what might have turned you on months ago might now leave you cold. Now, I had prepared an entire section on erotic immersion. You know, no bounds, no immersion. Fellas, I'm gonna have to punt on this for a rainy day, as the mod category is way too complicated for a noob. Way too many confusing options. For me, as much as I love my high-res textures and hi-fi sounds, I'm much more sensitive to logical immersion breaks. Can you guess what my immersion breaker is here? And it's not that Xi Jinping would never loan pandas to Ulfric Stormcloak. This mod makes the Windhelm entrance heavily fortified, befitting a city that is at war with the rest of Skyrim. But this here Eastmarch is a pretty cold region, and the civil war is recent enough that there wouldn't have been enough time for the corpses to have rotted this cleanly to the bone. So how can you restore and maintain immersion while still enjoying a heavily modded immersive Skyrim? It's not impossible. You can either use a prepackaged mod tool like Wabbajack, which I personally won't, as I rely on a lot of custom and defunct mods that I deem essential. To those with an iron will, you can also limit modding to finalize your mod list before starting your playthrough, or mod at very limited intervals. But the easiest, most obvious way to restore your immersion is to play quests that grab your attention so hard that it chokes out the weeds of your
unimmersive thoughts.
Recently, I played a quest mod with a narrative so emotionally gut-wrenching, I played most of it in VR with minimal modding. Enderal, a total conversion mod for Skyrim, is widely one of the most compelling RPGs I've ever played. The Ralada questline is, without exaggeration, the best faction quest I've ever come across in decades of gaming. I could gush on for hours about the narrative excellence of Enderal, but we're going to wrap it up for today. Sadly, no alchemist, not even New Reliant, can concoct a potion vigorous enough to fix my immersion dysfunction. Unfortunately, the more you notice, the less immersive the game world can become, as the current technology doesn't allow for holodeck levels of convincing detail. And visual mods, they do put you on a hedonic treadmill. So, another Redditor suggested to me a lore-friendly way of handling this condition wrought on by Skyrim Overmodding. I was recommended to roleplay as a interdimensional Daedric prince who creates a world around her for her pleasure, albeit with diminishing returns. Sums it up. Immersion woes notwithstanding, I still absolutely love Skyrim. I've recently started a brand new playthrough as a female Dunmer. I've only played Khajiit males all this time. Did you know that some Nord ladies will be so much nicer to you as a female? Thank you for joining me in my adventures in Skyrim modding. Let's meet again in another world, in another game.
Cai そうな